Right now, it's time to welcome our next live guest. We've got Harris Ligon with us from Telegraph.io. Harris, thank you for joining us, talking a little bit about some trends going on in the rail networks right now. How's it going today?
Hey, it's good. It's well. Thanks for asking. Can we go back to the question about Formula One real quick? That has to be the number one thing we have to be talking about. That's my pick. Formula One is the best racing out there. You heard it here first.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
See,
I think we're in agreement.
I'm also in agreement with that. I actually really like watching Formula One. So
I like Drone Racing League, though, too. You ever watch them flying the drones around in the warehouses? It's pretty cool. I'd like to get the virtual the glasses on and try and fly those through. It's pretty badass. Not much
I think
of a
you have a
spectator
future as an
sport.
influencer, Michael.
there you go.
There you go.
All right, Harris. So we just finished talking to Mary O'Connell about what's going on with the chassis shortage up in the Midwest because of kind of the rail congestion there. And I want to kind of start this thread of what's going on with Intermodal, starting with that, continuing that conversation. So she's talking about how we've got rail yards just continuing to be stacked and used as kind of this storage house for these containers because they can't be moved. Can you give us your perspective about what's going on there?
Yeah, great question. So, and I can tell you here in Chicago, and seeing a couple of different rail yards, there are a lot of containers that are stacked, which indicate to me there are not a lot of chassis that are widely available. And I think a part of that challenge has been, and I think we've been talking about this for some time, is that many distribution facilities, many shippers are hanging on to those containers and they're sitting on those chassis for longer periods of time. Some of that may happen to be that enough inventory isn't moving out the door, so they're not able to unload those containers and bring it in. But in many cases, those cycle times have extended out much further. And I think as it flows in, we're seeing rail service metrics actually go up. We're actually seeing rail speeds actually increase. They're about up 3% month over month so far. We're expecting those numbers to come in a little higher as June closes out. But I think that's going to create a pressure point at the rail yards when they look to unload the trains themselves. If there aren't available chassis, the velocity on those individual containers will not actually increase overall.
Yeah, that's exactly. So the velocity, how do they measure the velocity on the rail? Is it head-to-head or availability of container? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so typically the publicly available numbers today are actually train speeds. So they're averaging about 23 miles an hour generally across the major railroads. They don't publish widely available intermodal service metrics. From what we've seen, those times on the lanes that we measure for some of our customers have actually gone down remarkably over the past 4 months. But in certain pockets of the networks, especially here in Chicago, Joliet, and a couple of other markets, it is taking significantly longer than it should to get those containers unloaded on a set of wheels and out the gate.
And so this kind of extended timeline it seems like it's gone from they're sitting on a boat in the San Pedro Bay for so long to now they're sitting in a rail yard in the middle of the country for so long, right? It's kind of pushing this pressure further down the supply chain, as I said with Mary. Can you talk a little bit about if that's the case? And I know we've seen a pretty significant decrease in the amount of ships waiting off the West Coast, but now it just seems like it's been shifted down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great insight, Kaylee. I think one of the things that we've definitely noticed is that most of the ports, whether it's West Coast, Gulf Coast, or East Coast, have done a great job of working down the backlog of ships that are sitting off the coast. One of the things that we've seen is that now there's kind of this throughput that is then flowing through and out the door and hitting a lot of these main inland facilities. The challenge there becomes what is the availability of those chassis? And if those chassis pools are designed for turn times of, let's say, on average 3 days, but the turn times go up to an average of 7 days, that's going to be a real big problem for the fluidity on the internal side of the network. Look, it's no secret that there's going to be a big boom later in the back half of this year. The LA Long Beach markets are already up 20% higher than their 5-year average. So that's really exciting to see. And I think the idea that there's going to be a massive recession and demand is going to flatline in Q3 and Q4 probably is going to be hard to see, because I think when we think about a consumer-led economy, you're going to see more people actually out there buying and bringing in product. So many of those producers and manufacturers are actually going to be pushing product onto the shelves for the rest of the year. And then if a recession sets in, then I think we'll see that really take place in 2023.
I think this last 2 years or so has really highlighted the opportunity for investment into port development. We see a lot, especially on the Gulf Coast ports, with the Port of Houston, the Port of Mobile, the Port of Jacksonville, and on the East Coast ports of Savannah, Charleston, committing really large sums of money to improve their port conditions and improve maybe their channels a little bit to kind of accept this extreme flow of goods, right? And now this incredible increase in ships. Do you think that now the port congestion being pushed off to the rails and to the inland ports will now do the same for the intermodal side and kind of highlight the opportunity for there to be large monetary investment into those inland ports and into those rail yards?
Absolutely. I think you've seen on the East Coast, especially, there's been massive investment to not only have rail served facilities that are served oftentimes by multiple railroads so they can push the volumes directly out, but there are also inland facilities that are closer to major population centers, whether that's Atlanta, the Greenville-Spartanburg market, even the Charlotte area. There's been massive investment on those inland ports because it's a really efficient way in a very economical manner to take volume directly off of a ship, load it onto a train, and take it directly to the point of consumption. I think we all know that there's not going to be a massive net new addition of drivers that are seeking to get into the drayage market anytime soon. And so that means the massive investment, either whether you're buying land port side or you're buying land inland, I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity there. I think we're going to see a lot of continued investment in that space because obviously I think we see there's a massive shift in where people are choosing to live, and that's going to change the consumption patterns in the United States and where the ports are located.
Yeah, so Harris, let's talk a little bit about rates and the cost of intermodal versus over-the-road trucking. Is it favoring more towards intermodal right now, and how is that affecting things?
Yeah, good question, Michael. So the way to think about this, and I think we've all known, and FreightWaves has done a good job of reporting that truckload spot rates have fallen effectively off of a cliff, and they are expected to remain pretty flat throughout the rest of summer. That's created some interesting pressure on intermodal rates, especially in the spot market, where in some of the conversations that I've had with the Class 1s, they've indicated to me that they're aware of the trend, that there isn't as much favorability for rail pricing as there used to be. It's still favorable, 10, 15% better. But I think the way to think about this is that they're going to be adjusting rates probably post July 4th as there's a big push. And once they begin to get a better handle on terminal capacity and chassis availability, I think that you'll continue to see those rates become much more competitive. But I think the big factor is the availability of chassis for both intermodal or international and domestic shipments. That's really going to be a big factor there. So I think over the long term, rail is still competitive, but not as much as it was in the earlier part of the year.
And so that's talking about that in the spot market, but what about on the contract side of things? As truckload contract rates kind of start to increase and they're going the opposite way of the spot market, is the same thing happening on the intermodal side?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no surprise that there are many providers out there that are actually coming back and looking to renegotiate their contracts or find different opportunities to have some sort of competitive advantage, whether that's extending free time at facilities or finding additional ways that they can avoid surcharges. Absolutely. Everybody is coming back to the table to try to figure out how that's going to work out, especially for the back half of the year. Because let's be honest, nobody wants to lose volume in a highly uncertain market, and the railroads certainly want to gain volume as much as they can.
Yeah, they certainly do, and they don't want any disruption in service. What about some of the latest Surface Transportation Board rulings? Do you have any information there or any updates?
Yeah, look, it's been an interesting environment, right? You've got CN that's currently experiencing a strike in Canada that's affecting roughly 750 electricians, or that it really isn't impacting train service directly, but I think it's laid out kind of an interesting groundwork for what's likely to happen now that most of the major Class 1 railroads in North America are negotiating with many of their major rail unions, and they are up in front of the National Mediation Board now. The 90-day clock is going, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That also goes against what you just mentioned. The Surface Transportation Board recently put out an emergency order with Union Pacific, mainly around grain and agricultural products, specifically for Foster Farms. They've actually compelled Union Pacific to make sure that there are enough available crews, enough available locomotives, and priority given to those trains. It's the first time in a very, very long time that the STB has stepped in and issued an emergency service order. So I think it's going to be an interesting summer and an interesting environment to see how labor and regulatory bodies interact with the railroads. And I think the smart money is that the railroads are absolutely paying attention, are actively engaged, and I think there's going to be a really good opportunity for collaboration going forward.
Yeah, I would think so. Is that emergency order something of an alarm or something that is like welcomed?
Yeah, good question. It was surprising to me, Michael. I was not expecting to see an emergency order come out. There have been hearings going on for the past couple of months, so it really shouldn't surprise anyone that the STB is digging in a little more. But taking a very aggressive approach there and issuing that order, I think, should give anyone working at a railroad right now alarm and encourage them to really pay attention to the service product that they're delivering to their customers.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much for being with us, Harris. Always informative and interesting, my friend. You have a rest of your wonderful Tuesday and the rest of your week, sir. Right now, I'm going to toss it over to Kaylee Nix with another set of our headlines.